A quiet, soft-spoken woman walks into a courtroom. No one gives her a second glance. She looks poor, undereducated, and frankly, lost. The judge sees an easy target. He's corrupt, connected, and confident he can manipulate the case, throw some legal jargon, twist the facts, and crush her. But what he doesn't know is, she's a legal genius. Not only did she study law in secret for years, she has memorized obscure legal codes, knows case law like poetry, and has personal stakes that go way deeper than the judge ever imagined. As he tries to frame her, twist her words, scare her with legal threats, she slowly, calmly tears him apart in front of the whole courtroom. She flips the trial. She exposes the corruption. And when she finally wins, the world sees who the real mastermind is. Before starting the story, make sure to subscribe the channel so that you don't miss any update in future. No one noticed her when she walked into the courtroom. Faded clothes, broken sandals, a trembling hand clutching a worn-out file. People thought she was here by mistake. The judge didn't even look up. "Name?" he asked, flipping through papers, already bored. She whispered it. He smirked. A small-town woman, no lawyer, no backing. She'd never win this case. But what the judge didn't know was that the woman standing in front of him had spent 6 years studying law in silence, hiding from the very system that destroyed her family. And today, she wasn't here to ask for justice. She was here to take it. The courtroom door slammed shut behind her, and the air shifted. This wasn't going to be a trial. It was going to be a reckoning. "Where's your lawyer?" the judge asked, voice dripping with fake concern. She didn't blink. "I'll represent myself." A wave of suppressed laughter passed through the room. Even the clerk smirked. The judge leaned back in his chair. "Oh, you'll represent yourself? That's brave. Or foolish." She didn't flinch, just quietly opened her file. Pages lined with handwritten notes, color-coded tabs, footnotes, case numbers, citations. The judge barely glanced at it. Instead, he looked to the prosecutor, his longtime ally, seated comfortably with a smug grin. "Let's make this quick," the judge muttered. The courtroom lights buzzed, the fan creaked, and the woman, still silent, still still. She was watching, calculating, because she knew exactly what they were trying to do. This wasn't a trial. It was a setup. And they had no idea they'd just walked into their own trap. The prosecutor stood up, buttoned his coat like he was about to perform in a play he'd starred in 100 times before. "Your Honor, this woman is wasting the court's time," he said confidently. "She doesn't understand the charges. She's untrained, unfit to defend herself." The judge nodded like a board king. "Noted. Proceed." They began throwing terms at her like knives. Motion to dismiss. Violation of Code 37A. Unlawful possession without registered filing. She just stood there, silent, scribbling something. Calm. Too calm. The judge was already preparing the verdict in his head. This was easy. She'd fold under pressure. They all did. But then right when everyone thought she'd finally break, she looked up. One sentence. That's all she said. "Your Honor, under Article 19B of the Judicial Conduct Act, you were required to recuse yourself from this case due to your financial involvement with the plaintiff's firm." The room stopped breathing. The prosecutor's pen froze midair. Even the clerk looked up. The judge's face? Color drained. Smile gone. And for the first time, she was the one in control. The judge adjusted his glasses, stalling for time. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, voice cracking beneath the robe of authority. But the damage was done. Because she knew. She'd been researching this moment for years. And this court, this exact room, was the one that had let her father rot in jail for a crime he didn't commit. She didn't come for justice. She came with receipts. She slid a document across the table. "Page 3, she said softly, almost politely. The prosecutor hesitated, picked it up. Silence. Page 3 was a bomb. It showed the judge's signature on an illegal property deal linked directly to the plaintiff's company. A deal approved just weeks before this trial. The courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. The judge cleared his throat. This isn't relevant to today's case. She stepped forward. Calm, clear, unshakable. It's exactly relevant. Because if the court is compromised, then this isn't a trial. It's fraud. And just like that, the entire room tilted. The woman they ignored was now the one everyone feared. Order in the court. The judge barked, banging the gavel like it could erase the panic rising in his chest. But no one was out of order. Everyone was just stunned. The prosecutor leaned forward, suddenly aggressive. She's manipulating the system, Your Honor. She's making baseless claims to derail the case. The woman didn't even look at him. Instead, she flipped to another page in her file. Would you like to explain these wire transfers? She asked, her voice still steady, like a storm that hadn't hit yet. She held up a bank statement, names, dates, amounts. Money flowing from the plaintiff's company straight into a shell corporation tied to the judge's nephew. The judge turned pale. The prosecutor's face twitched. And for the first time, he stuttered. I'm not familiar with that account. Funny, she said, tilting her head. Because you approved those transactions while you were still part of the oversight committee. That's a federal offense. Boom. The court fell into heavy silence again. You could hear the air conditioner click on. Even the bailiff looked shaken. The judge adjusted his collar, sweat beading at his temple. And yet she stood there still, unshaken, prepared. Because this wasn't just a trial to her. This was her life's mission. And she'd already mapped out every lie they'd try to hide behind. They were fighting for control. But she was fighting with truth. And truth doesn't lose. The judge leaned back, visibly rattled, trying to regain control. You're crossing a line, he warned, voice low. But she wasn't scared of his threats. She knew that line. She'd been walking it for 10 years. She took a slow breath. This isn't the first time someone sat in that chair and buried the truth. Her eyes locked on his, unblinking, unapologetic. My mother was denied a fair trial in the same courtroom. Same judge, same tactics, same silence. Gasps echoed in the gallery. Whispers started fluttering like moths to a flame. She reached into her folder again, another document. Yellowed, fragile, a photocopy of a trial from over a decade ago. The defendant? Her mother. Convicted. Silenced. Forgotten. Your Honor, she continued, voice colder now, you've made a career out of stepping on the necks of the poor, the uneducated, the vulnerable. And now it wasn't just a case anymore. It was a reckoning. The prosecutor opened his mouth to object. But before he could speak, she dropped another photo on the table. Security footage. A hidden camera shot. The plaintiff and the judge shaking hands in a private meeting. Smiling. Time-stamped. Watermarked. Undeniable. This wasn't a defense. It was an exposé. And the courtroom? Now felt like a crime scene. By now, no one in the courtroom was looking at the judge. All eyes were on her. The woman in the plain sari. The woman they laughed at when she walked in without a lawyer. The woman they thought would fold under pressure. She stood taller now. Not because she was shouting, but because truth doesn't need volume, it carries weight. The media, quiet all morning, suddenly came alive. Cameras clicked. Phones started rolling. Every word she said was being recorded, and the judge knew it. He adjusted his mic. This is a distraction from the case at hand. She smiled, not kindly. No, Your Honor. This is the case. Because corruption doesn't wear a name tag. It wears a robe. Mic drop. The gallery gasped again. Even the jury leaned forward, caught in the slow-motion car crash unraveling before them. The prosecutor whispered something to the judge. She caught it. Trying to go off record now? She asked, eyes sharp. Too late. This isn't just your courtroom anymore. And that's when it clicked. She hadn't come alone. Outside, protesters were gathering. People holding up signs with her mother's name, her father's case, her story. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She was the voice of every silence this courtroom had buried. And suddenly, the system looked very small. For a second, the room held its breath. Even the air felt thicker, like everyone was inhaling the same truth and choking on it. The judge stared straight ahead, unmoving. But his eyes? They were doing laps, looking for an exit that didn't exist. She walked toward the evidence table. Her heels didn't echo, they punctuated. Each step, deliberate. Each breath, loaded. She pulled out one last folder, marked confidential in faded red ink. This file never made it into the official record, she said, locking eyes with the prosecutor. Because someone made sure it disappeared. She opened it slowly, like peeling a bandage off an infected wound. Inside, signed affidavits, internal memos, a whistleblower report, all pointing to a decade-long pattern of case manipulation. Names, dates, signatures. Some of those signatures belonged to people sitting just a few feet away. The gallery shifted. You could feel the guilt crawling up the walls. And then, a single juror raised her hand. "Your Honor," she said, voice shaking. I think this trial can't continue. Not like this." The judge blinked. He wasn't in control anymore. He was just another piece in the fallout. And behind that woman's calm expression was a firestorm she'd been building for years. This wasn't justice by accident. It was justice with a blueprint. The judge's face went ashen, his calm facade cracking like dry plaster. He glanced nervously at the prosecutor, who was now sweating bullets. The courtroom was no longer a stage, it was a war zone. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts. And through it all, she remained the eye of the storm. "You think this ends here?" she said softly, voice cutting through the chaos. "This is just the beginning." Outside, the news cameras were already live, broadcasting every explosive moment to a hungry world. Behind the scenes, powerful men were dialing frantic calls, trying to contain a scandal that had grown too big. But inside, the judge was sweating bullets, knowing his career and freedom were on the line. She looked him dead in the eyes. "Your decisions didn't just ruin one life. They shattered families, destroyed futures." For a moment, even the harshest critics couldn't deny the truth. And just like that, the courtroom wasn't just about law anymore. It was about justice, raw, unfiltered, and unstoppable. The game had changed. The judge slammed his gavel not to regain control, but out of sheer frustration. "This is an attack on the judiciary," he barked, voice shaking. But no one bought it. The room was silent, except for her calm reply. "Justice isn't an attack. It's a promise. A promise you've broken." The judge's eyes darted, searching for allies. But the weight of the truth was crushing him, and everyone saw it. He tried to speak, but his words stumbled and fell flat. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, no longer sure where he stood. Every face in the courtroom told the same story. The old system was crumbling. She stepped forward, voice steady, eyes blazing. "This is not just about me. It's about every unheard voice, every injustice swept under the rug." The judge took a deep breath, realizing this wasn't just his trial anymore. It was a reckoning. And reckoning, unlike mercy, is ruthless. The room felt like it was shrinking, every breath heavier than the last. Every eye locked on her like she held the final piece of a puzzle no one dared to complete. She took a deep breath and dropped the bombshell. A secret so explosive, it sent ripples through the courtroom like an earthquake. "This," she said, holding up a document, "is proof the judge personally altered evidence in my case and countless others." Gasps echoed. Phones clicked. The judge's face turned white, then red, then pale again. He stammered, trying to deny, but the words were empty shells. She leaned forward, voice low but fierce. For years, justice wasn't blind. It was blinded by greed and power. The prosecutor swallowed hard, eyes darting away. Suddenly, the courtroom was no longer about laws or rulings. It was about truth, raw, messy, undeniable. And in that moment, the scales of justice finally tipped. The woman who walked in as a simple citizen was now the storm that shattered the silence. The courtroom sat in stunned silence, like a city caught in the calm after a storm. The judge, once untouchable, was now a man undone, his empire crumbling with every truth unveiled. But the woman? She stood steady, no victory dance, no gloating. Just quiet strength. "This is more than my story," she said softly, eyes scanning the crowd. "It's a call for change. For every voice silenced by fear. For every truth buried under power." As the gavel finally fell, it wasn't just a sound. It was a promise. That justice could be more than a word. It could be a movement. And for her, for all of us, this was just the beginning. True justice isn't about power or status. It's about courage, truth, and never backing down, no matter the odds.